The call is now given to the Honourable Member for North Sydney.
Thank you very much, Mr Deputy Speaker. Mr Deputy Speaker, it does feel as though this is the 50th occasion at least that I've stood in this place and urged the Australian Parliament to properly recognise the genocide committed by the Ottomans against the Armenian people and indeed against the Assyrians and the Hellenic people in the last century. And on this occasion again, I call on this Parliament to recognise the events that occurred as a genocide. And I recognise in the gallery friends from the Armenian community and also representatives from the Assyrian and Hellenic communities and their ongoing struggle to have this matter properly recognised by parliaments around the world. Over recent months, unquestionably, we have witnessed a sea change in events across the Middle East as people have come out from years of oppression to properly recognise their desire for freedom and democracy. Part of the way of delivering freedom and democracy is to properly recognise the injustices of the past. Indeed, recognition is always a precursor to reconciliation. We as a nation should no longer fail to recognise the truth of history, truth that was recorded even by the Australian media as it was occurring at the beginning of the 20th century. And so I officially call on our Parliament again to recognise the genocide of the Armenians that occurred in Ottoman Turkey between 1915 and 1923. Countless stories of violence, bashings, and brutal murder, starvation, and related horrendous activities committed systematically against the Armenians for one reason alone, because of their race. And this is not an issue of discussion, it's not an issue of definition. Any systematic eradication of a race is genocide, regardless of the political or social unease it may bring. To avoid this understates the magnitude of suffering that the Armenians and others, such as the Assyrians and Hellenics, have suffered. When international jurist Raphael Lemkin coined the term genocide, he described the deaths of Armenians from 1915 to 1923 as a defining example. Indeed, the chilling words of Adolf Hitler during the course of his madcap justification of the Holocaust of the Jewish people, he remarked at the time, "No one remembers the Armenians." Since then, more than 20 nations have recognised the Armenian genocide as a crime against humanity, as have a number of international organisations, including the International Association of Genocide Scholars, the European Parliament, the World Council of Churches and South American parliamentarians. So here in Australia we should be next. Our country has a strong association with the events beginning in 1915. The Ottomans began their genocide of the Armenian people on the 24th of April 1915, the day before the first Australian soldiers landed at Anzac Cove. Many Australian soldiers witnessed the tragic events of the Armenian race suffered at the hands of the Ottomans. So to commemorate and recognise this almost 100 years after the genocides, we have in the gallery the presence of Armenian National Committee World Council Chairman Mr Hagop de Kachadorian. Mr de Kachadorian has the challenging task of representing more than 7 million members of the Armenian diaspora. There are double the number of Armenians living outside of Armenia than living in Armenia, which is a relic of the millions of Armenians driven from their country, their homeland and their way of life as a result of the genocide. I myself have Armenian heritage, and indeed that Armenian heritage, albeit untraceable because history did not record in writing what happened to many of the individuals involved. All I do know is that my grandfather, who was born in Aleppo, had members of his own family flee Armenia as a result of the persecution by the Ottomans. And so that history, whilst unwritten, must be recorded in this Parliament and must be recorded by all people who have a sense that they need to speak out against genocide, and I again call on this parliament to join with other parliaments around the world in recognising the Armenian genocide.